You're listening to the Good Question Podcast with Richard Jacobs. Our goal is to make each of our guests exclaim, that's a good question. I don't know the answer. Because when that happens, it means you, the listener, may be inspired to learn more beyond the interview and to ask great questions yourself that lead to new insights. In this podcast, we cover historical and current anthropology, comparative religion, and history. Welcome, and let's get started.
Hello, this is Richard Jacobs with the Good Question Podcast. We've got a great guest today, Adam Schell. He's the owner and founder of Brain Supreme. They make a line of nootropics that include mushrooms, and the whole point is neurological wellness. Adam was kind enough to send me some samples, the Genius mushroom blend, and also the athlete one. So we can talk about my experiences with that, and we'll get into it. So welcome, Adam. Thanks for coming.
Thank you so much. I'm looking forward to talking here.
Yeah, tell me a bit about your background. How did you get into nootropics and find interest in mushrooms and things like that?
So, my kind of Netflix pitch is, failed novelist turned drug dealer, which is not entirely true, but it's just for entertainment value. I'll say it that way. So I was a college football player at Northwestern. I was a Big Ten linebacker. I came out of that experience and I was kind of busted up and my lower back started going out all the time at 24 years old. It would go out so badly, I'd be bedridden for 2 or 3 weeks. And I was like, what's going to happen to me when I'm 44 years old? So I got very into yoga and my back pain completely went away. A few years later, I moved to Los Angeles and kind of all the things that made me an average college linebacker. I was a little bit Big Ten standards. I was a little slow, a little weak, but I was funny, flexible, and Jewish, made me like a great yoga teacher. So I ended up having a kind of prodigious private yoga practice and classes and so forth, celebrity yoga. And I got introduced early on to the California cannabis scene and started realizing I was working with did yoga for people with cancer. And so we started to use some complementary cannabis. And then a few years later, I was always writing a novel called Tomato Rhapsody. And the novel sold really well in 4 days, but between the purchasing of the manuscript and the release of the novel, we had the 2008-2009 housing crash. The publishing world completely imploded, and the number 1, 2, and 3 at the division of Random House that purchased my book all got fired. And then it culminated with Michael Jackson dying the day my novel came out. So it was like it never happened. 10 years of work. So I went back into teaching yoga and some writing jobs, few things, but I had a young child a couple of years thereafter who was quite a natural athlete and got spotted by a soccer coach at a very young age. The coach ended up he was from Spain. He ended up living with us, and we were living on the backside of the Malibu Mountains there in Calabasas at the time. And there was we were going to this very interesting school that had a lot of prominent families. And I started a soccer not-for-profit, and one of the dads was like, hey, I like the way you operate. You got this whole soccer not-for-profit, these great families, this coach. What are you doing? And I'm like, well, he said, come to this meeting with me. So he introduced me to the California cannabis industry. And literally the bar at that time was so low that honest and competent was kind of the new extraordinary. And within 3 years, I went from being a down on my luck failed novelist to having a multi-million-dollar cannabis distribution company up and down the state, 100 farms, great buyers. Things were going tremendously well. And during this time of being cash positive, I appreciate cannabis. I know it's great medicine. It helped a lot of when I was working with people with cancer. I've always appreciated kind of topically. Maybe I'd have a gummy or an edible from time to time, but I've never really been a big cannabis guy. But I did have a psychedelic experience as a 19-year-old that forever changed my life and the way I ran into a Vietnam veteran a homeless Vietnam veteran in Key West, Florida, while I was in the midst of this tremendous psychedelic experience. And the conversation that he had, he was 38 years old. I was 19 at the time. And we had this tremendously authentic conversation where he told me that he can't live inside. He always has to live outside because he was kept in a mud pen for 6 months as a prisoner of war. And all his fellow soldiers that were captured with him, they all perished. And I'm listening to him in this altered state, and he's 38 years old and I'm 19. And I realized that, oh my God, there's something that can happen when you're 19. He's had twice the life and he's never recovered. And in that state, just like the ramifications of violence and our own psychology and how fragile it is and how the importance of kind of maintaining your fragile, non-violent, loving disposition became profoundly important to me. And I never forgot that experience. So when I was doing very well in the cannabis industry, I started to siphon off some cash and really started to look at this field of psychedelics, but particularly I didn't want to do anything shroomy or, stonery. I was really looking at this from the standpoint of like, hey, is there something here that's really about life optimization, the ultimate form of supplementation? I had met somebody a few years earlier who was a scientist, a European guy, spoke several languages. We became friends, and I always kept in touch with the guy. And I started talking about psychedelics and mushrooms. It turns out that he came from 4 generations of mushroom foragers, and he had some knowledge. And so I funded him out, and he became one of the foremost psilocybin mushroom growers in that space. And then we started working with different genetics. We developed this particular strain of mushroom that's perfect for microdosing. And we really flushed out this concept of psilocybin and psychedelics as the ultimate form of life optimizing supplementation. So we created a supplement line where you know what you're paying for. Like there is a demonstrative improvement in neurological functioning, well-being, emotional well-being, happiness, energy. So that was really our mission, and that's the genesis of how Brain Supreme came into being.
Okay, yeah, let's start with the microdosing. So what is a typical dose for someone to, have a psychedelic experience with psilocybin, and then what is a microdose?
Great. So actually, this is, if your listeners are interested, we just put a very comprehensive but concise coaching course up on the website. It's a free download. It's 8 short videos, and it's got to really go in depth into this information that I'll touch upon. So the best way to understand microdose is to juxtapose it to the macro dose. So what's referred to as the heroic dose or a therapeutic dose historically has been considered 5 grams. Now it's 1 gram equals 1,000 milligrams. So 5 grams or 5,000 milligrams define the kind of quintessential psychedelic experience, known as the heroic journey. And at the basically sub 10% level of that, that's where microdosing takes place. So microdosing is historically between 100 to 400 milligrams. And the idea is that you want to create, and you would just scale up your dosage till you get to a level of perceptible, non-intoxicating, non-hallucinatory, but you should feel some quantifiable, be it 5, 10, 20% uptick in your neurological performance, your emotional well-being, your energy, your libido. There's a myriad of benefits and different reactions that we get from clients and customers over the years, but that's really what it is. So it's at the sub 10% level of the traditional 5 gram macro dose, and it's really used much more in the field of supplementation. You want to think of it as a supplement, not as a psychedelic.
So what should people expect? I know everyone's different, but what should people expect to feel and experience when they take a microdose of psilocybin? And is it first dose affects you, where you have to do it for like a week or two for it to hit you?
So, that's very interesting. So psychedelics are based on psilocybin microdosing is predicated on neurological needs. It doesn't relate to body weight. It also has a lot to do with neurotoxicity, I've discovered. So I have a whole microdose coaching business as well. And so I've been able to kind of look at and problem solve from a real world personal interaction. I've had almost 3,000 conversations as we've been developing this company over the years about how to microdose, complications, interactions, contraindications, how to maximize the benefits. So it's based on neurological needs. It's not based on body weight. Now, for most people, somewhere between 200 to 300 milligrams of psilocybin, synergistically blended with other ingredients, is the perceptible dose. That tends to be what we call the sweet spot. Now, you scale your dosage upwards until you get to what we define as that sweet spot, which is perceptible, non-intoxicating, non-hallucinatory. And the benefits can really vary very widely. We often talk about just a greater sense of emotional well-being. A lot of people feel a lot happier, less depressed. There's an uptick in libido. People often talk about that they're a little kinder, a little more gentler, a little more present. Personally, there's been 2 really significant long-term benefits from 6 years of microdosing and experimentation for myself. The first one is stress compartmentalization. So I did very well in the cannabis industry for 3 years, and then literally it was MC Hammer-like how colossal the fall was. I got out of my lane, I bought farms, and within 2 years, I had literally lost every penny and then some that I had ever made. We had fire and smoke damage the first year. So we lost about 54,000 projected pounds of cannabis. Oh, and then, it was terrible. And we did the math, it's $700 a pound, so it's like It's significant. And then the next year, it was a lot of good money after bad because there's no crop insurance. We had an inverted atmospheric river in Northern California. We had 11 days of constant rain, 13 inches of rain from the day before harvest through every day to harvest. So we lost every single pound to mold damage. And after that, I was completely ruined. So I was 50 years old, essentially bankrupt, in a terrible situation, couldn't pay workers, everything. COVID was falling in the world. Northern California was going crazy with COVID and COVID restrictions, and the kids couldn't go to school. I had lost investors' money. I had lost family money. I had lost all my money. And I'm not wired that way. When I give my word, it really matters to me. So I was so stressed and so depressed. I was sleeping 3-4 hours a night, waking up in cold sweats. But about that same time, we had developed the Genius formula, which is our flagship. And my ability to operate effectively on 4 hours sleep, compartmentalize my stress. I'm not really prone to abuse like alcohol or drugs or anything like that, but I was the heaviest I'd ever been. I was very depressed. But my ability to kind of compartmentalize and process and recreate my life, I really think a lot of that had to do with the development of our Genius formula. I was really able to piece my life back together, build this brand, move my family and recreate my life. And I credit a lot of that to Brain Supreme. The other factor that I've noticed significantly over 6 years of microdosing, and there's a really terrific film called Fantastic Fungi, which deals with the life and work of Paul Stamets and mostly the mycelial networks that interconnect the forest. So mycelium is essentially the root fibers of mushrooms. And they're these mycelial networks that stretch for vast distances. The largest living entity in the world is a mycelial network that's over 5 square miles. And it relays, these mycelial networks relay the information of the forest and the different trees and what the trees need. If the trees need certain nutrients, if they're under threat, it relates all the information of the forest. They can't even really understand it yet. They think it might even relate to communicating to different birds of prey to go catch a salmon, eat a salmon on this tree because this tree needs the salmon guts and, the bodies and carcasses of the salmon for different nutrients. It's quite extraordinary. What I've found over all these years is what I call the etheric mycelial network, which is I literally feel like from my heart and from my head, I feel these fibers extend out and I make connection to other human beings. And I know what I'm meant to give. I know when I'm meant to be quiet and receive, or I know when there's no connection there. So I've had this tremendous increase in intuition, empathy, serendipity. That's been a real noticeable benefit in my life. When you look at our website and you go through the reviews, we often hear about mood. We often hear about reduction of negative affect, that's self-chatter. If a microdose is taken in the morning, a lot of people report that they sleep much better at night. They get extra reps at the gym. We have this protocol called performance dosing, where you take a little bit of higher of a microdose and you combine it with vigorous exercise about 45 minutes before your main 2 workout days. And people talk about entering flow state. My mixed martial artists and athletes feel that they're predictive in the way they approach their sport. I know I currently do performance dosing, and my workouts at 54 years old have never been more enthusiastic and energized, and I can't wait to experience them. We also get the interesting thing about psilocybin is it seems to meet you at the level of your needs. So if you're a pretty well-adjusted, high attaining, functioning adult, you'll get the 5-10% boost in cognition, performance, energy, libido, whatever it may be. But a lot of my veterans, combat veterans, first responders, people really dealing with trauma and PTSD, they'll often report that they're 50-60% better, that they stop having suicide ideation. I've had numerous clients and customers tell me that night terrors have disappeared. People who were so stressed and they would attack their spouse in their sleep very often, 3 or 4 times a year. The night terrors have stopped.
Well, question though. When does it take effect I know everyone's different, but when does it take effect on average? After the first dose or after a week of doses or a month of doses? What is needed to build up enough of it to affect you?
Right. So I'm just going to speak frankly because for me, my company, we're fully transparent with everything. So I sent you samples, if you're okay with me talking about this, I sent you samples about, 7 or 8 days ago, and you've had not a particularly demonstrative response. So I want to be honest about that. So it runs the gamut. So, okay, Richard, if I have 100 clients, okay, and the first thing you got to do is you got to rule out antidepressants, because if you're on an SSRI or SNRI antidepressant, there is about a 50% chance that the brain receptors so you eat psilocybin, it converts to psilocin, and then the brain absorbs psilocin. That psilocin receptors get blocked in about 50% of people who are on antidepressant. So if we rule that out, I'll have about 90% of my remaining group there that literally on day one, they'll notice an uptick in focus and energy. I'll often hear about focus. I have some others, then there's maybe about 5% that need a little bit of a cumulative effect where they need to stay consistent. And for some reason now, so the average microdose is 200 milligrams, and sometimes you scale up over the course of the week to 300 milligrams. That tends to be the norm, but there are some people who respond very well to 100 milligrams, which is great. It lasts longer, it's cheaper, and so forth. But there are also some people who need a 400 or 500 milligram microdose. And that's the first. We always tell our customers and clients to begin with what we call the supplement protocol. And there's 3 tenets of microdosing, as I've kind of defined in the coaching course. The first is to demystify. Like, you just got to get comfortable with it. Any stigma or concern that you have to approach it in a very sensitive and mindful way. On a day off, there's no conflict, just to demystify the process. And then from there, you start to familiarize yourself with it. How do I want to approach this as a supplement? It's very subjective. Everybody has different neurological needs. Start with 1 capsule a day in the morning, glass of lemon water. An empty stomach is always best with psilocybin, and just keep pushing your dosage up over the next few days until you get to that level of perceptible. And if it feels too much, you back off. So there's no real hard answer there. So, and then I have a few clients who are just outliers, that they do not seem to respond to psilocybin. They're not on antidepressants. They're not particularly neurotoxic. They don't have a lot of pharmaceutical drugs that kind of in their bloodstream and in their process. They just don't seem to respond. Of that group, I found something very interesting. Sometimes a slightly larger or recreational dose, about 1 gram to 1.5 grams, which will have some kind of, traditional psychedelic effect, but a little more in the recreational zone, like colors will pop, sounds will pop. You'll be very prone to laughter and joy. That something about that recreational dose triggers the psilocin receptors in the brain to turn on. And then that group can go back and microdose at, 200 or 300 milligrams or 2 to 3 capsules a day and have a lot of success with it. And then I've just had, honestly, out of 6,000 units sold, I've had 2 clients who just seem to have no response to psilocybin. And even after they did a recreational dose, and they're not on antidepressants. So, there's a wide scope in there, but most people feel it pretty immediately. Some people need to build over the course of those first 2 weeks, push their dosage up till they find that sweet spot, and then they kind of know. And sometimes people notice it in terms of a cumulative effect. They're like, I can't say that colors were brighter, sounds were better, I was more patient. I can't say that I was hornier, it wasn't like a libido stimulation. But as I think about it now after 2 weeks, I think I might be a little happier. I was a little less judgmental. That person at work that always pisses me off didn't seem to piss me off. So there's a real range in there. It's quite subjective. You have to familiarize yourself with the process of it. For most, it's fairly dramatic and fairly immediate. And then there's a smaller percentage that kind of has to build into the process. And then there's a few outliers that don't seem to perceive any benefit from psilocybin.
Is there anything like for marijuana, taking CBD with it appears to potentiate it? Modify its effects, but not in a way to take away the effect. Is there any analog for psilocybin? Is there anything you could take to potentiate it, to either make it smoother, last longer, more effective, et cetera?
Well, that's the beauty of the product that we created, is we've been thinking about for years on these different synergistic blends on how to maximize the effects. So we've got Genius, which is our most nootropic formulation. Then we have, which is for neurological benefit. We have Feel Good, where we blend with adaptogenic herbs and nutrients for kind of the heart, the mood, the libido. We have an athlete formulation where we blend with performance boosters and natural testosterone boosters. And then we have our Black Stack, which is our extra strength formula. Now, it seems that, as Paul Stamets discovered, it seems that niacin and lion's mane work very well in conjunction with psilocybin, and we do include that. But there is a broad array of minerals and vitamins that we've discovered work very well. We've actually created a proprietary blend of nutrients, amino acids, vitamins, and so forth that really seem to synergistically create a beneficial entourage effect. And that's kind of the secret sauce of what we've created as we approached it as a supplement. In terms of like other traditional, recreational drugs or things like that, I think cannabis can be very effective, good medicine. I think it can be great recreation for people as well too, far better than alcohol. But I do not like the idea of using psilocybin and cannabis, THC, at the same time in complement. I'm not saying
to do that. I'm saying, is there anything that you could take with psilocybin that is similar to taking CBD with THC?
With THC. Oh yeah. So yes, you could. So if you're going for performance, you can increase the lion's mane and cordyceps. So we have a recipe on the website for Brain Supreme coffee. So all the other functional mushrooms, chaga, reishi, cordyceps, lion's mane, work very synergistically and well. If you're going for athletic performance in the morning, or if you're not in the morning, but if you're going for increased athletic performance, you can add cordyceps mushrooms and rhodiola. You can add creatine, and you can add a real high quality omega. That's kind of I have some supplement recommendations. So those work very well. High quality vitamin C works very well in conjunction with a microdose, because you eat psilocybin, it converts to psilocin, and that conversion process facilitated with vitamin C. So honestly, there's a host of nutrients. So just adding a microdose to your overall supplement regimen increases the potency of both your supplements and the psilocybin.
When it increases the potency, what does that mean? Will it turn a microdose into a stronger microdose or a recreational dose? That's strong.
No. I'm not talking about like that. I'm just talking like it will increase the neurological benefits. It will seem to increase your sharpness, increase your energy, cardiovascular performance. So I've been doing experiments in the morning where I'll take a microdose. I'll take a Genius and Athlete at what I call my performance dose, and then I will take increased amounts of cordyceps, rhodiola, creatine, and omegas, and then I will go crazy on a Peloton, try to set a personal best. And then I'll do it different intervals with the same amount of rest, and I find that I get like about a 5% improvement bump when I do that. And it's not like I'm shroomy or tripping or anything, but I have increased cardiovascular performance and energy. So it works almost in terms of juicing up your supplements, not in terms of it doesn't increase. So, okay, the thing with psilocybin is a very powerful anti-inflammatory, and part of the reason why even at the microdosing, people experience a little bit better vision and better hearing is because there is something referred to as ocular inflammation. This is the inflammation, that kind of subtle inflammation that surrounds the eye and even the ears and the sinuses. And psilocybin reduces those levels of inflammation. This hasn't been studied yet, but we're kind of developing this little theory that it's this reduction of inflammation in the brain and the eyes and the ears that creates the classic kind of heightened sensations that you often get on visual acuity, oral acuity. It's not only because you're getting new neural pathways fired because of the psilocybin and then regenerating old neural pathways. I think there's an anti-inflammatory benefit that's kind of profound in terms of the improvement in reaction time and vision. I've had a number of clients tell me that they start to see better after a few days of microdosing. Their vision improves slightly.
If someone microdoses, let's say for a few weeks consistently, when anything bad happens, should they take breaks periodically to reset themselves?
Yeah, so the standard protocol that we kind of start with is the supplement protocol, which is 5 days on, 2 days off. Go for about 25 days, maybe 30 days, or, probably about 4 weeks of microdosing, and then take a week off, take 5 to 10 days off. So the OGs in the psilocybin and microdosing space, there's a good many of them, but Dr. James Fadiman, he's literally on so many podcasts on Spotify that you can find him. And then Paul Stamets. There's no known contraindication with psilocybin microdosing level ever. It might not be effective for you, you might have wasted some money, but there is no known counterindication. So in terms of like what you're doing with your life or other medications that you're taking, at the microdosing level, you're all science and kind of captured anecdotal testimony finds that you are completely safe, very safe. I have had really zero instances of any counterindications. If I have 100 clients, the one side effect's not necessarily the right term, but the one side effect that will occasionally pop up, maybe 2 or 3 out of 100, is on your first few days of microdosing, you might get a little sleepy. Now, here's what's happening. So psilocybin is neurogenerative. So you generate new neural pathways, and it's also neuroregenerative. So older and damaged pathways are getting healed and refired. And your brain is the biggest burner of calories in your body. And when you're now stimulating new neural pathways because you're breaking out of your old everyday routine, that's the same amount of caloric usage. You now have increased caloric usage. Sometimes that can cause people to get a little tired, a little sleepy. I've never seen it go for more than 3 days. And it's also a good indicator of overall brain health and hydration. So if that happens I suggest that you drink a little more water, add some quality electrolytes to your water, like LMNT. There's a bunch of good companies out there, but definitely not Gatorade, like a higher quality salt electrolyte. And then at nighttime, if you add some magnesium and some other mineral complexes, that sleepiness almost always goes away. And then you start to experience the benefits of microdosing. But really outside of sleepiness, zero side effects and zero contraindications.
Has anyone tried homeopathic doses of psilocybin or other substances? Much, much, much lower than microdosing, but has anyone even gone there?
So we were making a product at a 50 milligram level, which is on a very low side of a microdose, but it didn't seem to be particularly effective. So both with our kind of test group and with our larger test group and the few sales that we kind of did early on in the product, it didn't seem to be particularly effective. A lot of it can depend on the potency and quality of the mushrooms and so forth, but it really seems for most people that 100 milligrams is kind of the starting point for some demonstrative or appreciable effect of microdosing.
Okay.
100 milligrams is just 10 nanograms of psilocybin. So you grow the whole mushroom and you dehydrate it, you grind it. There's a whole array of different biological components in there. Only 10% of the 100 milligrams is actually true psilocybin. So,
there's all those ancillary compounds that probably no one understands, but they do. It's probably thousands.
Yes. Which is why I have such mixed feelings about science that's coming out on psilocybin. Although it's overwhelmingly positive, almost all these research facilities are using synthetic psilocybin, single molecule.
I know. Just like with cannabis, they have Delta 8, Delta 9, Delta 10,
right?
THC, some of them are terrible.
Right.
Do you know has anyone studied how psilocybin is released from the body? Is it through urine? Is it stored in fats? Has anyone traced its path through the body and its elimination?
Yes, it's eliminated through urine. It does not store in fat, and it's not tested for or appreciably noticed with any drug testing. It just will show up that you've had mushrooms. It can show up in a hair follicle test. So I think it can linger in the body, but no one's ever found it in a hair follicle at the microdosing level. This is just the macro level. So there's still kind of more research that needs to be done with that, but it's not stored in fat. It leaves the body through urine almost within like a 48-hour period.
Has anyone tried to do a transdermal version, either through a cream or a patch?
No, well, actually there are creams, but the creams are meant to be topical agents for topical effect. Inflammation, pain, infection, things of that nature. It would not be cost effective to try to experience the benefits of a micro or macro dose by rubbing it on the skin. You'd need to, it could be a couple $1,000s worth of body cream.
And the directions say take it first thing in the morning. What would happen if you took it before bed?
So psilocybin is not a stimulant in the way of caffeine or anything along those lines, but it is neuroactivating. So some clients take it in the evening and they love it. They sleep better. But it can be mildly sleep disruptive because your brain is still going. You're still feeling active and engaged in the world and life. So it tends to be better. Take it in the morning. And when you take it on an empty stomach, the absorption is just much higher. food and psychedelics at the macro and micro level very much compromise the effects. You won't notice it. So the classic microdosing protocol is in the morning, empty stomach, water with lemon is quite effective. Or we've discovered that coffee with fats is excellent, particularly if we do this modified bulletproof coffee where you add something nice, organic heavy cream, or if you can find raw heavy cream, grass-fed butter, you can have a little MCT or coconut oil and take your microdose at that. For my athletes, that's a real winning formula.
My wife makes a mixture with cacao powder, cacao butter, and that makes it somewhat chocolatey, and cacao nibs. It's really good.
That's fantastic. Yeah. We actually have in the recipe, we've got, so I do them all. I do a little, because we have raw cream where I think you and I live. So I get some raw cream, I grass-fed butter, a little bit of coconut oil. MCT oil upsets my stomach for some reason on an empty stomach, and I just think it's unnecessary and expensive. So I just use a little bit of coconut oil, and then I'll add Ceylon cinnamon, Ceylon. That's called true cinnamon. It's the healthiest and most potent form of cinnamon. I'll add creatine, about 5 grams of creatine, and then I'll add the Adaptogenic mushroom blend, which has 10 different mushrooms and ashwagandha, and then I'll do a little raw honey, and I blend that up, and I take my microdosing with that. And for me, like, my workouts are terrific. My performance and energy through the day is terrific, and I can go until about 2 or 3 p.m. in terms of my intermittent fasting. Now, some people might say that because I've had honey, I've broken the fast, but whatever. I don't need to eat until 2 or 3. When I do that Brain Supreme modified bulletproof with my microdose, I'm juiced up and great until about 3 o'clock in terms of appetite.
Yeah, and you don't get up at 2 p.m., so how long are you awake by that time?
Oh, when do I get up in the morning?
Yeah, okay. I was going to say, you don't wake up at 2 p.m. probably. So how long have you been awake by 3?
Well, I have this interesting thing. So, look, dude, I'm a New York City, football player, kind of. I'm still a big dude, but I had a mystical experience with an Indian Swami, like totally randomly, about 25 years ago. And ever since then, I pretty much wake up at 3:30 in the morning, and I just have to pray and meditate. So I wake up from about 3:30, and I don't really want to wake up at 3:30, but I always wake up 3:30. So I get up and I pray and I meditate for about an hour, and then I fall back asleep from like 4:30 to 6:15, and then I start with the kids in school and lunches and so forth. So I'm pretty much up at 6:15 every morning, and then I'll have my coffee. Usually I give myself about 90 minutes. So I'll do my microdose Brain Supreme coffee at around 8 a.m., 8:15 a.m., and then I'll make a smoothie somewhere between 2 and 3.
Yeah, that's a lot. That's a long time to go without eating. You're probably doing time-restricted eating as well because of this, right?
Yeah, time-restricted eating. So I was doing, I like a little sweet in my coffee. And I was doing the monk fruit with a Lancanto product, monk fruit and erythritol, but something about that, all the sugar alcohols just started to concern me. So I went back to a little bit of raw honey. So I guess you could argue that I'm kind of breaking my fast with a teaspoon of raw honey, but yeah, I do. Right. I don't have a meal until usually, or smoothie until 2 or 3, and then I eat dinner with the family, depending on when kids have practices, somewhere between like 5 and 6:30.
Okay. No, that's great. Yeah, I've tried traditional nootropics, pyrazine, racetam, aniracetam, all these things. In the world of nootropics, how do you see psilocybin fit in versus these other, I don't even know, you can't call them traditional, but other nootropics that are out there?
So nootropics are the category of herbs, amino acids, and nutrients that improve neurocognition and brain performance. It's a terrific field, an emerging field. Basically, a microdose of psilocybin is what I've found, and most people would agree, is the world's best nootropic. Like all the other nootropics in the world, the alpha GPC, L-theanine, L-tyrosine, guarana, a little bit of caffeine, whatever those nootropics are, they're not as effective as psilocybin. But a little bit of psilocybin in conjunction with those other nootropics is a terrific and powerful combination. So to answer your question specifically, I personally think psilocybin is the best, most potent and effective nootropic in the world. I think in the microdose, it works very well in complement with those other nootropics. That's kind of the philosophy of our company.
So what's next on your radar? Where are you going with all this? New products coming, or what direction does it take?
We're still starting out. So it's, I've been at this for a number of years, research and development, but we've really had Brain Supreme out for about 18 months now. And, it's going very well. We're taking, kind of a slow and cautious approach. the feedback and customer connection has been quite wonderful. It feels great. Every day I get testimonials about it's helping me in my life and performing and my kids and my relationship. It's quite wonderful. My veteran community, we do a lot of veteran outreach. That's quite wonderful too, because the help and healing it's bringing to people in those communities has been quite wonderful. We're working on the Brain Supreme coffee. So we're going to do a coffee with and a coffee without. So not a coffee, but a coffee additive. So we're going to have the chaga, the reishi, the cordyceps. So we're going to create our own kind of proprietary, what I have on the website with the Brain Supreme coffee. We're going to basically make that in powdered form, and we'll do one with the Brain Supreme mushroom blend in it, and then one without. So some people want to take their microdose independently in capsule form and then add this to their coffee. Others are going to want it in their coffee. So those are the next two products that we have in development. We've been working on a separate combination of mushrooms for a sleep formula, and we kind of thought we had it, but then, it just wasn't so great. So the next products will be our Brain Supreme kind of coffee complement, and then we're eventually going to come out with the sleep formula.
Yeah, I've had coffee with mushroom powder in it. It does make me feel more alert and better, and I guess more relaxed. But if you combine psilocybin with a bunch of different other mushrooms, in a microdose amount, and you put it in coffee, what do you imagine will happen?
Well, that's kind of what I do every day. So, for me, it's an increased sense of well-being, cognitive neurological performance, energy. I have to say at 54, not to be too graphic, but the libido benefits are great for men and for women. I get a lot of feedback like that. So it's really good from, an interesting thing with psilocybin is it moves the brain in a beneficial direction, whether you're cognizant of that or not. So when I say libido, me personally, and the feedback that I get from clients, I'm not like a horny dog, with salivating when I'm at the gym. I am more attracted to my wife. I've never loved my wife more. And I get that same feedback from other clients and customers. That's it's increased their libido, but not in any kind of degenerative way, in a kind of benevolent way where they love and more attracted to their partner, which is quite nice. So, I'm sorry, I got a little sidetracked with that. So that's, one of the kind of additional perks and benefits that I've found over the years.
Okay. So you're going to come out with a coffee mixture. Anything else? Where else could this go? Other compounds to add into the mix, or what do you think?
Yeah, there's more to do. I'm really this performance dosing protocol. So our athlete formulation combined with Genius, I'm really interested in that because I, as a former competitive athlete myself, and the feedback that we get from other athletes. So I want to continue to push into that performance space, combining different mushrooms and herbs and nootropics. We're really testing how it's affecting performance. And, one of the things that I have a great many athletes, and with the performance dosing, they'll do one practice day a week, let's say Wednesday practice, and then Saturday game day. And so for me, I think that's a really big arena because athletes are always looking for an advantage, but no one really wants to cheat. So if you can, and I think that from an ethical and moral standpoint, if you can develop a nutritional advantage over your competition, then that's great. That's like training better, that just shows discipline and willpower, which is what being an athlete's really all about, how you succeed as an athlete. We're definitely going to push into the performance and athletic space. We still are working on some different types of mushrooms to kind of crack the code with sleep, but I'd say in order of products, our kind of coffee complement, the Brain Supreme coffee is going to come next. And then hopefully we'll have our sleep product out. We have an immune line that we're working on right now. So we would do the microdose combined with an immunological, specifically immunological combination. There's some issues with blood flow and cleansing of the blood that I'm kind of personally interested in. So we're working on some product lines and doing some research in those areas. But yeah, we have, right now our hands are pretty full with the 4 product lines that we have. And we're just perfecting our coffee and getting the packaging and kind of design right for the coffee product.
Okay. Well, it sounds like there's mushroom for improvement. That's good.
I've never heard that before. That's great.
Well, good. I try to get one good joke in there.
Yeah, there you go.
Well, very good. I know, Adam, that you have a code for listeners. So let's tell them the code and where they can try out the product.
So brainsupreme.co is our company. I can be reached through the website as well. I respond to all emails personally and usually very quickly, but I do it voice to text or voice to email. So like a little bit of humorous understanding if there's some punctuation and malapropisms and everything. But most everybody gets that and just appreciates that they hear back from the owner almost instantaneously. So brainsupreme.co, and let's do Genius 15. Doesn't matter, capital, all caps, lowercase. We're going to do Genius 15. We'll give a nice 15% discount in there for Finding Genius listeners.
Thank you very much. It's very generous of you. It's been a really good call, and I hope people try it out and get the benefits from it. So thanks for coming.
Thank you, Richard. I enjoyed this conversation very much. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Good Question Podcast. Please email support@thegoodquestionpodcast.com if you have any referrals to great guests for us to interview. Visit thegoodquestionpodcast.com to hear more interviews. And please help us spread the word by rating and reviewing us on Apple Podcasts, iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you listen to this podcast.